Okay, we'll begin. Are there questions? Okay, so if not, let me start. So let me remind you that you are studying the E minus P recombination. This process. And last time we described what do you need to do for the full analysis. So let me repeat again. So full analysis. This involves multiple variables. In fact, in principle, infinite number of variables. So any we define as the number density of free electrons. Also free protons. NNL is the number density of NL state of the H atom. And then you set up appropriate differential equation that takes into account the processes that produce this as well as processes which annihilates this. So this is equal to the rate of production minus rate of annihilation. And similarly, the other ones, also the rate of production minus rate of annihilation. Okay. And the idea now is that the right hand side, okay, is a function of Ne and NNL, all these quantities. Because you can calculate the rate of production if you know the densities of various kinds of particles which are present. Okay. Similarly, the rate of destruction if you know the densities of various kinds of particles that are present. So you set up the differential equation. Okay. So this gives you coupled differential equation. And you can put the boundary condition. That at high temperature or large or small time, large T, all the NNLs are 0. Yeah, because at that time there is no hydrogen atom, there are only electrons, free electrons and protons. And as I said, I mean, of course, you cannot deal with infinite number of variables, but you can truncate. Okay. And I mean, I refer to one paper which does an analysis of this kind with 300 levels. Okay. But as you also described, that you are going to do a simplified version of this analysis. And that will basically reduce this to a system of 3 kinds of particles. So instead of having infinite number of variables, you have 3 sets of variables. So let me describe how this is done. So we'll analyze this. By making a simplifying assumption. And that involves 3 systems. First is the free electron proton system with variable Ne describing the number density of free electrons. This is the same as what we introduced in the last slide. Then we have the NL states with n larger than or equal to 2. And this will assume to be in thermal equilibrium. That basically means that we can write NNL in terms of N2S by using the thermal distribution. 2L plus 1. This is the degeneracy of the L angular momentum L states, and then you have this exponential factor B 2S minus BNL. And we also justified this assumption last time. And basically the point is that the number of thermal photons that make transition between 2S and NL states is still large in number compared to the number of electrons. So large in number compared to number of electrons, and as a result, it makes sense to think of this as in thermal equilibrium with the bath. Okay. So remember that in this case, the bath is not thermalizing itself. Okay, the bath is thermal because it was thermal earlier, and it just continues. The Planck distribution formula continues. So because the bath is not thermalizing, you have to make sure that the bath is big enough to absorb any effect that is produced by this extra electron proton system. Because if it disturbs the bath, it cannot reset it back into thermal equilibrium. Okay, so that's one point one should keep in mind, that so that assumption you have to make in this, and that assumption is valid. We argued that as long as we consider states of energy levels at n equal to 2 or higher, okay, because the differences are small enough so that the thermal suppression is not enough to make 10 to the 10 into something of order 1. Okay, it still remains large number of thermal photons per electron. And the third system is the ground state, the 1s states. With number density. N1s. And of course, you have a conservation law. And the conservation law is that N1s plus sum over NL, NNL, this is for N larger than or equal to 2, plus Ne, the number of free electrons. This is the total number of electrons, and that we have seen after the heliums have formed bound states is about 0.73 times Nb, the baryon density, right? Because a fraction of the baryons go into the helium, okay, and the corresponding electrons have already gotten bound. So this counts the number of leftover protons, which is the same as the total number of electrons. So even though you are writing three variables, there are really two independent variables, okay, which you can take to be, say, N1s and N. Okay, N2s can be determined in term by using this formula. So let me try to express this. Okay, so next what we're going to do is to try to express this explicitly as a formula in terms of N2s. Okay, simply by using this formula, so that we don't have to write the NNLs anymore. Okay, we can write everything in terms of N2s. So we have this relation that Ne plus N1s plus sum over NL with n greater than or equal to 2 . So this one I can now write as sum over NL, n greater than or equal to 2, of N2S times 2L plus 1 e to the power minus B2S minus BNL by T. So this I can write as N2S times f of t, okay, some function of t. Now note that this number B2S minus BNL is roughly 13.6 electron volt times 1/4, okay, because 2s has 1/4 the energy. The binding energy for 2s state is 1/4 that of the ground state, minus 1 over n square. So this can be bound, okay, because n equal to 3 is the lowest one. So this is bounded by 13.6 times, let's say this is 6, n equal to 3 means 9, so 5 over 36. So if we now calculate this, e to the power minus, say, B2S minus BNL by T. Okay, let's do the, so the highest value of this is obtained for n equal to 3, right? For a larger n, this number will be even larger and it will be more suppressed. So this gives you, say, e to the power minus 13.6 times 5 over 36 and 1 over t. Okay, so let's say t of order 4000 K, that's where interesting things start happening. So if you take t of order 4000 K, then that's 1 over 4000, we convert to electron volt, times 8.6 times 10 to the minus 5. And that's about e to the minus 5. Okay, if you do this calculation, it's like e to the minus 5. So it's a reasonably small number. It's a small number. And this basically says that this sum, even though f of t is involves this sum, this basically says that f of t gets most of its contribution from 2s and 2p states. So f of t is approximately, so 2s gives you 1, okay, because this is L equal to 0, that's 1 plus 3, that's about 4. Okay, and for these, of course, this number is 0. Okay, for n equal to 2, this is 0. So f of t is approximately equal to 4, but I'll keep it as f of t, okay, without setting it equal to 4. But you should keep in mind that for most purposes, you can just set f of t equal to 4. Okay, are there questions? So our goal now will be to try to set up a differential equation. And to do that, let's first introduce some nicer variables which involves ratios. And the way we'll do it is that we'll divide by this conserved number nb times 73, nb times 0.73, all of these, to define some nice ratios. So let me give the definition. We'll define x as Ne over 0.73 nb and y as N1s over 0.73 nb. And then N2s, so Ne and N1s can be written in terms of x and y, and N2s is not independent because we have seen that this 0.73 times NB is NE plus N2S times F of T plus N1S. So this tells us that N2S is given by 0.73 NB times 1 minus X minus Y times 1 over F of T. Is this okay? Is this clear? Let me state the goal. So the goal will be to set up differential equations of the form dx dt as some function f1 of xy and dy dt as some function f2 of xy, and then solve them. Okay, so it will be a set of differential equation in two variables. So let's now proceed to do this. Okay, and we'll do this by writing down the differential equations that we wrote down initially, but only for this limited class of variables. So we'll write down differential equations of this kind. In fact, here I should have been a little more careful. So this should have been not this, but any lambda cube, right? Because you want to calculate inside co-moving volumes, right? That's the easiest to calculate. Okay, because in the absence of any production or destruction, this is the quantity that will remain conserved. Okay. So we'll set up differential equations of this kind, okay, and then convert it to differential equations for x and y. So let's then start with the first one. So the first, let's try to calculate d dt of any lambda cube. So this is a number of free electrons in a co-moving volume. So this will be given by minus the rate at which it forms hydrogen atom, okay, because that depletes free electrons, okay, and then the rate at which the hydrogen atom ionizes by thermal electrons and forms free electrons. So this I'll write as minus alpha times NP times any lambda cube plus beta times N2S times lambda cube. Okay, so let me try to explain the various factors over here. So alpha here is sigma times V. Sigma is the capture cross section of E minus P, okay, an E minus P collision to form H atom in state NL with n greater than or equal to 2. Notice that I have not allowed n equal to 1 state here, right? And this is something that I had discussed last time, but we'll discuss it in more detail in a few minutes. Okay. So this is a total conversion rate of electrons into hydrogen atom by forming states in the NL, by forming H atom in the NL state. So let me explain the various factors. So we are counting the rate per electron. So you have to multiply by it's sigma V times the n, where n is the number of particles it collides with, the density of particles it collides with, And so E minus collides with P to form hydrogen atom. So that's why it's NP. Okay. So this is the rate per electron, and then you multiply by the total electron density in the co-moving volume to calculate the rate per co-moving volume. So this is the rate of annihilation, and this one is the rate of creation. So beta is the rate of ionization of NL states by thermal photon. So one should have really written this as, so what this actually represents is this quantity, sum over NL, beta NL, NNL, lambda cube, right? Because this beta NL is the rate at which the NL state gets ionized by thermal photons. Okay? And then you multiply by the density of NL states, that's NNL times lambda cube. But because NNL can be expressed in terms of N2S, so this you can write expressed in terms of N2S. So it's proportional to N2S, so you can take the N2S outside, and whatever is left in the sum, other than the lambda cube, which I have explicitly written, so whatever is left in the sum, I'm calling beta. So that's what beta represents, right? This is a shorthand way of writing this expression. But beta NL, I mean, we can write NNL in terms of N2S, right? That's what this is reflecting.
So
yes, go ahead, please.
Here we should be writing the ground state of hydrogen also, right?
Okay, we'll see why you are not writing it. Okay, we are not writing it. So both of these have reasons, right? Here you are not writing it because of one reason. Here you are not writing it because of another reason. But we'll now argue that in none of these cases we should include the n equal to 1 case, one states. So let's try to explain that. So we go to the next page. Okay, maybe I can this one I can explain here only. Okay, it's easier. So why not n equal to 1? Okay, let's ask. So why not n equal to 1? And the reason that we are not including this is the following. Okay, that in order to excite a ground state of the hydrogen atom to an E minus P pair, we need gamma of energy 13.6 electron volt. And we have seen in the last class that for T equal to 4000 K, the actual number of thermal photons with this energy per electron of E equal to 13.6 electron volt is very small. Right? I think we got a factor of 10 to the minus 20 versus 10 to the 10. So 10 to the minus 10 per electron. And that's the reason why you are not including this guy. Because the number of thermal photons that can actually excite it is so small that contribution is negligible.
Yeah, but that would come through the equation while solving the equation only.
Yeah, it would. So you could include it, right? But then we will see that this is very small, right? That's why you have not included it.
Okay.
But you're right that you could include it, and then you will get this suppression factor of e to the minus 13.6 electron volt by temperature. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So now let me discuss this.
Hello.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Should we not include collisions between atoms?
Collisions between atoms. Yeah, we could, right? But that effect is also very small because that will, because that, yeah, so that involves two atoms coming together, right? Okay, here of course you can ask two electron and protons are coming together, okay? But these are charged objects, so their interaction cross section is much higher than the collision between two atoms.
Okay.
Okay, and typically in the collision between two atoms, what will happen is it will be more like an elastic collision, or there will be some rearrangements. But it will be very hard to excite in this collision between two atoms. It will be very hard to excite, for example, a 1s state to higher values, right? What can happen is that when the energy difference is not so large, then collision between two atoms can make transitions between these different NL states, but that's of course part of the same system.
Yeah.
Okay. Are there other questions? Okay. So now let me explain why did you not include E minus P to 1s transition? And this we had explained last time, but let me do it again. So basically what happens is if you take E minus P to 1s, this will produce a 13.6 electron volt photon, which will basically dominate the spectrum of photons at this energy. And what is going to happen is that this photon, this 13.6 electron volt photon, that this will eventually collide with an 1s atom. Now you can ask why 1s and why not higher excited state. And the point is that even though the 1s atoms are forming slowly, their number is still much larger than the higher excited states, and that's because of this factor, right? You have this e to the minus b1s minus bnl by T suppression, right? So even though you have not reached thermal equilibrium, okay, so the actual number of 1s doesn't exceed NL by this much amount. Still, the number of 1s atoms is always much larger than the excited state. So most of this will eventually hit an 1s atom. Elastic collision with the electrons, it loses a little energy, but not much. So when it hits a 1s atom, what it will do, it will either ionize it or raise it to a highly excited state. Why highly excited state? Because the reason is that it may lose a little energy, okay, either because of the collision with electrons or because of the expansion redshift, right? It may lose a little energy, but the amount of energy that it loses is small compared to 13.6 electron volt, because it's a huge amount of energy. And so if it excites the ground state, it will excite it to a highly excited state. But from a highly excited state, this differs from continuum by a small amount. By a small amount. And there are large number of thermal photons. Large number of thermal photons that can ionize this. Okay. and indeed it will ionize it. And the fact that it will ionize it is reflected in the fact that if you actually look at the equilibrium distribution, the number of states in the highly excited states is very small, right? Because of this Boltzmann suppression factor. So, and the physics behind that is precisely this, that there are large number of thermal photons which can ionize it, and it will ionize it at a low temperature like that. So effectively what happens then is that if we make this transition, E minus P to 1s, the thermal photon that is produced, or not the thermal photon, the 13.6 electron volt photon that is produced will eventually end up destroying this 1s state. Okay, it will basically give back a E minus P pair, okay, either directly or by this cascade process of first exciting it to a highly excited state, and then a thermal photon will ionize it. So because of this, we see that a direct transition into 1s state doesn't change this, because eventually it will come back here. And that's the reason why you are not including the transition into 1s state in this equation. As we will see that most of the transition to 1s state happens from the 2s and 2p states. Okay, just states that are excited above the first excited state.
So
Yes, go ahead, please.
when we are writing all these equations, we are starting at some zero concentration, right? Like there is no 1s to begin with. There are only free electrons initially.
Yes.
So at that time, this process is highly important, right?
Yeah, but the point is what is going to happen is that at that time, any 2s state and 2s and 2p states which are formed, okay, they are basically going to immediately get converted to 1s states.
Yeah.
Right? It's like the what you saw in nucleosynthesis. The deuterium, okay, as deuterium is being produced, it is getting depleted into the heavier nuclei because their equilibrium densities are much larger. Okay? So the process is slow because the number of deuterium atoms itself is low. Okay? And the same thing is true here. The process of going into 1s state will be slow because we have to form 2s states. But initially, when you are right that initially you start with everything zero. But as soon as the 2s state forms, right, it basically starts getting converted to 1s state.
I mean, okay, maybe we shouldn't include it here, but when we write something like d by dt of n 1s lambda cube,
yes,
there I'm saying it would be much more important to introduce this.
Not really.
I mean, there you cannot give an argument.
Okay,
that
the point is initially when the number is very few, then it doesn't matter anyway.
Sorry?
When the number is very few, right? Then it doesn't matter anyway. I mean, it's only when it's is getting to build up substantially that we need to use this equation, right? Of course, these are approximate equations.
Yeah, but we don't know what signature that term might leave to the long time solution.
No, it will not lead to these are linear differential equations, right? So it will not lead to big effects in long term. I mean, you are worried about the system being chaotic.
I mean, not really, but I mean,
if the system was chaotic, then of course, I mean, you cannot solve by numerically anyway, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, the growth can be arbitrary, right? At this stage, the growth of N1s atoms.
Yes.
So at this stage, there is no reason to ignore such reactions.
You can say just at the beginning when N1s was 0.
Yeah, I mean, for some interval at least, yeah.
Yes. Okay, but that interval is very small, and the error that you make in that small interval, right, is not going to affect much because ultimately you want to build up the N1s states, right?
Yeah.
So ultimately, you are interested in knowing when everything gets converted to 1s, right?
Yeah, sort of saturation. Yeah.
Yeah. So initially, if you make a few errors, right, it's not going to make that much difference when N1s are small anyway. I think when you write down the N1s equation, it will become clearer because the N1s equation, right, will get its major contribution from the from these NL states, right? In particular, 2s and 2p states. So
Yeah.
their densities are important. I mean, there is a small probability that N1s will get excited by thermal photon to the 2s and 2p states, but that contributes very little. So N1s buildup, right, is not done by N1s, but it's done by the other excited states. So if you make a small error in N1s at the initial stage, it will not really affect bad things very much.
Okay.
But I agree with you that when the first N1s forms, then this argument, of course, doesn't hold. Okay, because I mean, if the 13.6 electron volt photon is emitted, right, there's no other N1s atoms, right? So what will it hit?
Yeah, and I mean, I was going to say that if we were to seriously write down some rate, let's say gamma, where gamma is the sigma v of that process,
Yes.
and when we write n1s instead,
Hello, I think your voice got cut.
that n1s is small.
Yeah, so we'll write down the N1s equation, then we can see if you are satisfied.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we will not include in that the contribution from any, this part.
Yeah, okay.
Because the N1s will be kicked out, right? And you are right that when N1s is very, very small, then it's not valid, because the photon may lose energy by either scattering with electrons or doing other things before it hits another N1s atom. But that small error doesn't really make a difference.
Okay.
Okay, are the other questions? Okay, so let me write this equation again, and let's see how to calculate these things. So d dt of any lambda cube is minus alpha. We have any square lambda cube plus beta n2s lambda cube. Now this alpha can be calculated. Alpha is sigma times v, and this can be calculated using microscopic theory. Can be calculated using microscopic theory, theory of electrons and protons, or can be measured. Okay. And you can basically use the v goes to 0 limit of sigma v, which is a finite limit, as we discussed earlier, because these are non-relativistic, so the v is really small. So what about beta? Okay, how to compute beta? Now, of course, you can calculate beta also microscopically, because you know the thermal distribution, you know the photon, the collision rate between photon and NL states, and how it excites. But we'll see that there is a shortcut. Okay, and in fact, this shortcut is something that we had seen once earlier in the analysis of the, I think this was during the analysis of the neutron fraction evolution, right? That we saw that if we assume things in equilibrium, then there is a matching between then this ddt of this becomes 0. Okay? And that happened automatically once you use the appropriate formula for these transition rates. Okay? Now we are going to use this in reverse, right? So even though you can calculate beta, okay, from looking at the reverse process, okay, namely a photon, collision of a photon on an NL electrons going to E minus P. Okay. But that you know is related by crossing symmetry to the process that produces alpha, right? E minus P capture. Okay. So this suggests that you shouldn't have to calculate beta independently, right? Somehow alpha must contain information about beta. Okay, because this is related to alpha by crossing symmetry, and we'll see that indeed it does. Knowing alpha, you can calculate beta, and our logic goes as follows. that if we really had thermal equilibrium, if we had thermal equilibrium, okay. So which means what? Which means two things: no expansion and any over n gamma, any small compared to n gamma, any over n gamma, any over n gamma going to 0, okay, so that the system doesn't affect the bath. Then we will have ddt of any, lambda is constant, right, equal to 0. And this would mean that alpha ne squared should be equal to beta n2s, okay, if the system has been in thermal equilibrium. But now we can write the formula for n2s. Remember that n2s in equilibrium was given by ne times np, but that's the same as ne squared, times e to the power minus, e to the plus b2s by t b2s by t, and then there is this factor of met over 2 pi to the power minus 3 by 2. Okay. So if you substitute this, okay, we get beta as alpha times e to the minus b2s by t and met over 2 pi to the power 3 by 2. Is this clear? So we derive this formula assuming that it's in thermal equilibrium. Okay. But of course, then you can, once you have derived this, right? So beta gives you the total transition rate from the NL states to E minus PPR by thermal photons. So that you can also use when the system is not in equilibrium. Okay, because this is the by definition, this is the rate induced by thermal photons. So this is the formula. So that means that the once alpha is determined, okay, and alpha is determined from microscopic analysis, we can find beta. Okay. Again, let me emphasize that you could also, in principle, derive the expression for beta by explicitly computing the reverse process. Right? You have the thermal distribution. You know the gamma hydrogen atom collision rate. Okay, gamma hydrogen atom to E minus PPR collision rate. And using that, you can in principle compute beta, but that will give the same value as this. Okay, other questions? So now let's start. Let's look at the next. See, once you have get these two equations, the third equation is automatic, right? Because that's given by the conservation law, which is the how N2S is changing. Okay, so we'll not need to write down the third equation. So this one, okay, I'll ignore the transition from direct transition from E minus P. And so this, in fact, is mainly going to get contribution from 2s and 2p. For reasons I'll explain. Okay, so let me explain what these numbers are. So gamma 2s is the rate of decay of 2s to 1s, okay, plus 2 gammas. Remember that this requires us to produce 2 gammas. Gamma 2p is the rate of decay of 2p to 1s plus gamma. So p is the probability that the gamma from 2s to 1s, sorry, 2p to 1s decay, 2p to 1s decay. Okay, these are also known as Lyman alpha photons. That this does not excite a 1s back to 2p. Because you see, it is probable that this gamma, because this gamma also is highly energetic, that this could, and this is highly energetic, not highly energetic, and this is in fact much more than the number of thermal photons of this energy that is present. So it's possible that this gamma will eventually hit a hydrogen atom in its ground state and excite it back to 2p. Then you don't gain anything, right? So that's why you multiply by this probability p that this doesn't happen. Okay, so this we can call the survival probability of the gamma, that it doesn't get hit by 1s atom and gets absorbed and raises the 1s to 2. Now notice that we have not included NL to 1s for n greater than or equal to 3. And reason is again similar to what we had seen earlier. Namely that if we have NL to 1s transition, then the photon that is produced has higher energy than this one, okay, than the Lyman alpha, which basically means that that photon is almost certainly going to eventually hit a 1s and raise it to 2p. Because 1s to 2p costs much less energy than 1s to NL. So it may not be able to excite it back to NL, but it will certainly excite it back to 2p. Okay, it cannot lose energy that fast so that its energy goes below the Lyman alpha. So because of this, the NL to 1s doesn't help, because those photons will be absorbed by 1s to get back to an excited atom. So this is the reason we have not included them. Is this clear?
So why should we add a similar term for electrons, like the p term, the 3 gamma to pp term?
Why should you add this?
No, why shouldn't we add a similar term for electrons? Basically for just proton electron going directly into N1s, and add a probability p that it does not collide back with the N1s and excite it back to free electron proton.
Yes, you could. I mean, we will see. Yeah, I mean, we could, but the point is, because it's from a continuum, you always get a little more energy, right? The E minus P collision, you always get a little more energy than the minimum energy that is needed to excite it back. right? Because E minus P had a certain velocity, right? Even though they're non-relativistic. And so it's almost certain that it will excite it back to the
like
continuum.
even though the gamma for that process will be much larger.
Yeah, but see, the point is here what's happening is that this can excite it back to a 2p, right?
Yeah.
So the reason that I have included it here is because once the electron loses energy, then it cannot excite it to anything, right? That's why this is non-trivial. See, I mean, you can ask, why didn't you include p equal to 0, right? And the reason is that once it loses a little energy, then it's unable to do anything to 1s. Whereas there, even if it loses a little energy, it will excite 1s to a very highly excited state. And from there, the thermal photons can just take over and kick the electron out. Here, that is not possible, right? That once its energy falls below the excitation energy up from 1s to 2p, then that photon is useless in exciting the electron at all from the ground state.
What is this P exactly given by? Like,
Oh, we'll calculate P. We'll calculate P, right? And we'll see what it is given by.
okay.
Okay, so this, okay, I think the actual calculation will be done tomorrow, but I'll indicate today how to do this calculation. I mean, what is involved in doing this calculation. So basically, as I said, that once this electron is the photon is emitted, its energy starts reducing, right? And the reduction is mainly because of the redshift. And if the energy falls below the energy of the Lyman alpha photon, then it simply cannot excite anything back. Okay, it doesn't contribute to turning 1s into something else. But in the other case, right, from the highly excited state, from the E minus P to 1s, even if it loses little energy, right, it can certainly excite in 1s, maybe not all the way to ionization, but to an E minus P to a very highly excited state. And then that gets ionized by thermal photons.
But
Okay.
but then can we also assume that N2s, I mean 2s states are in thermal equilibrium?
That 2s states in thermal equilibrium.
Yeah, I mean, let's say an electron is captured with a proton. It forms an hydrogen atom in 1s state.
Yes.
But okay, I understood. I think my question is not well formulated.
Yeah, so it gets to a very highly excited state. That's an out of equilibrium process. That's not equilibrium distribution, right? But then, because it's a little more than the equilibrium distribution, what's going to happen is the thermal photons are going to kick it out.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Right. So that's what is happening. Because it's already, I mean, we are assuming that the NL states are already in equilibrium, right? So anything extra that you put in there will be destroyed by thermal photons.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Is this clear? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, this epsilon or E, whatever, this also contains N gamma in it.
Yes, E I'm going to describe. I have not said so far, right? So E is the analog of the beta. So this is the rate of transition from 1s to NL states by thermal photon. So E in fact will be very small because this excitation energy is large, and so I mean it's very hard to find a thermal photon that has enough energy to take you from 1s to NL. Okay, but we will still calculate E explicitly.
So can you say it again? What I was asking. I mean, I was saying once NS states are excited and they go to some NL states,
Yes,
then uh, how will they be destroyed? I mean, if even if they are destroyed, what will they be go into? I mean,
they will basically go into E minus P, right? Because see, this is in thermal equilibrium with the bath, right? That's what you have assumed.
yeah.
So if you get a little excess compared to the a little excess energy, excess number of states, right? It will go into the phi minus P. Because effectively what has happened is that E minus P has reduced, right? And we have gone into an NL state, right?
Yeah.
Okay. But that process is in thermal equilibrium. So you are now a little more than, you have a little more electrons in the NL state compared to the E minus P state, because one E minus P state we have converted to NL state. But because the thermal photons are continuously hitting both E minus P, P system and the NL system, the thermalization will ensure that these extra NL states will be converted back to the E minus P state, right? Whatever the thermal equilibrium distribution is supposed to give.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? So you cannot put, so if you put anything excess in the NL state, it will get kicked out. Right? That's the idea. And in this case, the thermal distribution, the thermal equilibrium is a valid formula, because we are really talking about a very highly excited state. Right? So there are lots of thermal photons that can excite that back to E minus P.
Okay.
Okay. Any other question? Okay. So let me write this equation again. ddt of n1s lambda cube is minus gamma 2s plus 3p gamma 2p times n2s lambda square.
So just hello.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Yeah, like after a lot of time, what do we really expect? That N1S should be most populated, and then the other NNLs, and then NE.
Exactly. So eventually everything will go into n1 state.
And no, I want to know what will happen with the free electrons.
They'll all be bound. The free electron
Okay.
density will go to 0
Okay.
eventually, right? Because eventually, once the temperature falls way below, everything will be bound, right?
Yeah.
It's just that this will happen at a process that is slower than what the thermal equilibrium told us. Because we derived this using thermal equilibrium, right? And we got some numbers, right? That by 3000 K,
Yeah.
most of the electrons are bound, right? And we'll see that things are a little different, okay? That things will be a little slower because of this process, that the 1s state doesn't equilibrate immediately. Okay, this because essentially it's, as I said, it's analog of the Dalton bottleneck, that the 1s states have to form via the 2s states, okay, via the 2s and 2p states. And because the number density of 2s and 2p states is low, that's why the rate of formation of 1s state is lower than what thermal equilibrium would suggest.
Okay.
Okay, so let me write this. So what did I do? This should have been plus. Okay. So gamma 2s and gamma 2p, these are decay probabilities, right? These are decay probabilities, decay rates. Okay. These can be computed using microscopic theory or measured. or measured. Okay. So what about E? Okay. So E, as I said, is a reverse process, right? It's exciting the 1s state to the excited states. Okay, and because of this, the number of thermal photons go down rapidly with energy. Most of the contribution T is going to come from the 1s state getting excited to 2s or 2p states by the reverse process. So we are going to try to calculate E using detailed balance. Okay, try to calculate E using detailed balance. Namely, assume thermal equilibrium. Assume thermal equilibrium. And set ddt of N1 is equal to 0. Okay, thermal equilibrium lambda equal to constant. Okay, no change. And set ddt of N1 is equal to 0, then that will give E. But here I should just emphasize this again. Okay, and this will be important. Thermal equilibrium requires that the bath is not affected by the E minus P8 system. Okay, we'll see why this is important. So let's assume this and calculate it. Okay, but the reason that this is going to be important is because you will see that the E that you calculate by assuming thermal equilibrium is not quite the E that you have to use. Okay, you have to make some corrections. Okay, but let's proceed anyway. So assuming equilibrium, we have gamma 2s plus 3 gamma 2p. Okay, so in equilibrium, because we are assuming that the bath is not affected by the E minus P8 system, okay? That means the actual density of E minus P8 system is very low. We can set P equal to 1. Okay, this is an important point. We can set because what does P represent? Right? P represents the fact that once you produce this thermal photon, once you produce thermal 13.6 electron volt photon, then that is going to hit another electron, okay? Another 1s atom and excite it. But in the in thermal equilibrium, okay, when you are keeping the system in equilibrium by being in contact with the bath, the different components of the system do not affect each other, right? Because that will be something that is happening out of equilibrium. So in equilibrium, we will simply ignore. We can just set P equal to 1, namely that we just say that the fact that you are producing a photon, okay, the system is so dilute that the fact that you are producing a photon has no effect on the photon itself. Okay? In other words, the number of 13.6 electron volt that is being produced by this capture process, not 13.6 electron, number of Lyman alpha photons that are being produced by this capture process, we'll assume is much smaller than the number of thermal photons of this energy that is present. This is of course not true in the system that you are dealing with, right? But in equilibrium, because it's only in equilibrium that you can apply this. So in equilibrium, we have this feature. Okay, so we'll calculate this. I'll call that the rate E naught. N2S will be equal to E naught N1S. And now you are going to use the fact that N2S is e to the power minus B2S, sorry, B1S minus B2S. To get E naught. Is this clear? Okay. So let me emphasize again, this E naught that you have calculated will be valid for a system in the laboratory where you can imagine that you have a few E minus P pairs sprinkled in a huge bath, in a huge box. So in that case, the E minus P, it may produce a thermal photon, a Lyman alpha photon, but that is never going to hit another E minus, another hydrogen atom. Okay, so that's the idea that the densities are so dilute that disturbance that you have produced a Lyman alpha photon will have no effect on the system. Okay, the system doesn't react back. Okay, it just the thermal photons always keep it in thermal equilibrium. So this E naught that we calculate is based on that assumption. Is this point clear? Now you can ask, how does the actually differ from E naught? So remember that E naught is calculated assuming the system in thermal equilibrium. That means that the bath is infinitely large. Now, if you use the fact that using this n gamma over Ne of order 10 to the 10 and the value of e to the minus b1s minus b to the 2s by t. Okay, so this is a suppression factor that tells us how many thermal photons are there of this energy. You see, to be able to excite at 1s back to 2p, you need thermal photons of energy that is relevant for the Lyman alpha line. Right? So you can ask how many thermal photons are there in the system. And that number, if you multiply by 10 to the 10, this you multiply 10 to the 10 by this number, and you will find that the number of thermal photons present with energy B1s minus B2s is small compared to Ne. Namely, this basically dominates over this 10 to the 10. So what consequence does it have? So consequence is that if a 1s is excited to 2p by a thermal photon, it significantly depletes the thermal population of photons of energy V1s minus V2s. Is that clear? So what we are saying, let me repeat again, that the fraction of thermal, the number of thermal photons, okay, which have this high in energy to be able to produce a 2s out of 1s, or 2p out of 1s. Okay. That number is small compared to the number of electrons that are present. Number of electrons that are present, that means number of hydrogen atoms in one state. So which means that if a 1s state makes transition to 2p by absorbing a thermal photon, then it affects the number of thermal photons in this energy. So it affects the next process. Okay? It affects the process that another 1s state, okay, will be excited to 2p because the density of thermal photons of this high energy has gotten reduced. Now, when we assume thermal equilibrium formula, we assume that the bath is infinite. So a depletion of one thermal photon of energy V1s minus V2s has no effect on what happens next time, or when the what happens when the next 1s is excited to 2p. Okay, if the density remains the same because the depletion is very small. So this assumption breaks down, and we see that this process of exciting 1s to 2p by thermal photon has actually affected the bath. So we'll now write down the formula for E. Let me remind you the formula for E0. This was the formula for E0. So E will be given by gamma 2s plus 3 p bar gamma 2p So what is P bar? P bar is a probability that a thermal photon of E1s minus E2s hitting a 1s atom at time t has not gotten absorbed earlier due to 1s to 2p transition. Okay, maybe I should have not said probability. This is the fraction of thermal photons. Maybe I should write that. This is the fraction of thermal photons of this energy that have not gotten absorbed earlier. Because the point is that the absorption of the thermal photons in making 1s to 2p transition has an effect on the path. And that's why you have to look at this probability. For 2s, there is not much problem because the 1s to 2s transition happens via 2 photons. And that requires much less energy per photon. So you can ignore this effect there. Okay, but for 1s to 2p, which happens by a single photon, this p bar is important. Okay, are there questions?
So shouldn't it be 1 minus that?
1 minus that.
Like if a photon is hitting a 1s, then it is destroying it, right?
Yeah. If a photon is, yeah, so that is of course part of this E, right? That's how you calculated using E naught, right? So this P bar is the fraction of photons that survive earlier collision. See, this 3 gamma 2p was calculated assuming that the number of thermal photons is given by the thermal distribution formula, right? Now, if the number of thermal photons has gotten reduced by this fraction P bar, then you have to multiply this by P bar.
Yeah.
Right? So let's forget about this gamma 2s. So what is this giving us? Right? This, by the detailed balance, right, is telling us that if there is an infinite thermal path and the E minus P system was in, there's a very dilute gas of E minus P system, which is in equilibrium with that infinite thermal path, then E naught would have given the rate at which the thermal photons are converting the 1s state to 2p state. Now what we are saying is that in the system under consideration, the number of thermal photons that have that much energy is actually less than what is given by thermal distribution formula. And how much less is captured by this P bar. And the reason that this is less is because some of those high energy photons have already been removed by collision with 1s state earlier.
Is this P bar a function of time?
Yes, it will be in general a function of time. Everything is happening at a fixed time here, right? Because you remember this is part of the differential equation.
Yeah.
So everything can be a function of time, and we will calculate this P bar also, right? Just like we will calculate P.
Okay.
Okay. Any other question? Okay. So let me now write down the equations, and then I'll just say a few words about this calculation of P and P bar, and then the actual calculation we'll do next time. So let me write again ddt of n1s lambda cube is gamma 2s plus 3p gamma 2p n2s lambda square minus e n1s lambda cube then you have d dt of any lambda cube is alpha n square lambda cube minus beta n2s lambda cube. Then you have the formula E is given by gamma 2s plus 3 p bar gamma 2p to the power minus b1s minus b2s by t. And we had given beta earlier. Okay, now I'm not going to give the expression for beta anymore. Okay. So now the idea that we divide this, we divide by 0.73 NB lambda cube, total number of electrons, total density of electrons. Okay. And now remember that Ne over this is given by x and N. Okay, so we define x as Ne over 0.73 NB lambda cube and y as N1s over 0.73 NB lambda cube. So this gives you dx dt, second form from the second equation. Right, so this gives you dx dt as alpha x squared times 0.73 NB. Okay, I just wrote any in terms of x times this. And with this I can take inside the derivative because this is constant, right? Because ddt of this is equal to 0. Minus beta times n2s over 0.73 NB, but that we had already calculated earlier, right? So that's n2s over 0.73 NB. Okay, I'll do that. Let me write n2s over 0.73 NB. And dy dt is gamma 2s plus 3p gamma 2p okay. And now we can use this fact that Ne plus N1s plus N2s times f of t is equal to 0.73 times NB, to write N2s over 0.73 NB as 1 minus x minus y over f of t. Okay, so this one we can substitute here, okay, in here and here. Okay. So you see effectively that in these equations, sorry, E is given here. Let me write this. The only thing that we have not calculated are P bar and P, right? Because everything else, okay, this is of course known, right? NB is a known number. So let me remind you that NB you will calculate by NB naught, that's today's density, times lambda cube. Sorry, lambda to the minus 3. Right? That's the way we'll calculate, or equivalently NB naught times T over T naught cube. So everything is known except P and P bar. And now let me just say in words what will be involved in calculating P and P bar, and then I'll stop. So now suppose, okay, let's just look at P bar. Okay, P bar will be similar. So let's suppose that this Lyman alpha line was infinitely short. Okay, that means it's described Lyman alpha photons always carry the same energy. Okay, let's say omega alpha. Then what's going to happen is that once this photon is produced, okay, of certain energy, 13.6 electron volt over 4, okay, that much, not 4, 13.6 times 3/4, right, 1 minus 1/4. So once this photon is produced, then immediately it will start getting redshifted. And even after a short time, its energy will be less than the energy that is required to raise from 2s to 2p. So it will never give you back a 2s to 2p transition, okay, because as soon as the photon is produced, it's going to get diluted. So that if that was really the case, okay, then you would conclude that P is 1, right? Because once the Lyman alpha photon is produced, then it will get diluted and it can never excite it back. And recall that this is not the this should not be the case for hard NL states, right? Or the E minus P transition. Okay? They are, even after redshift, it can still excite. Okay, and that's why we don't include those contributions. But the reason that P is not 1 is the following. And the point is that Lyman alpha photon, okay, actually that is not sharp. Okay, it has a width. Okay? And it has a width precisely because the 2p makes a transition to 2s, right? So the 2p is an unstable state. Okay? And by the uncertainty principle, an unstable state, okay, its energy cannot be measured with infinite accuracy because it only exists for a certain amount of time. So that means the energy has a weight. So instead of the Lyman alpha line being a sharp line, okay, there will be an energy distribution. And which means that sometimes it's emitted with an energy that is a little larger than the mean value of the Lyman alpha line. Sometimes it's emitted with an energy that is a little less than the mean value of the Lyman alpha line. And because of this, right, in cases where it's emitted with an energy that is a little larger than the Lyman alpha line, that even after it gets redshifted, it can still excite that 1s back to 2p. In fact, even if it has a little less than the mean value, it may still be able to excite a 1s back to 2p because the energy of 2p is also not sharply defined, right? It's subject to the same uncertainty. And it's this feature that we are going to use to actually calculate p. The reason that p is not 1 is precisely because the lines have width. Okay, the Lyman alpha line is not sharp. So next time we'll actually calculate p using the right Wigner distribution, which tells us what is the distribution of energy of the Lyman alpha photons as they are emitted from a 2p to 1s transition.
This P has nothing to do with P bar, right?
Well, we'll see that we'll calculate P and P bar independently, but we'll see that they're actually equal. But as stated, it has nothing to do with P bar. Right? These are two different kinds of probabilities. But they use the same physics. Why is P bar? Why would P bar be 1? Right? If the line was infinitely sharp. And the reason is that the thermal photon has a distribution, right? Now imagine that the Lyman alpha line was infinitely sharp. Then only photons of that energy will get absorbed in the 1s to 2p transition. But because of the photon has a continuous distribution, that means that most of the photons will be unaffected. So that's why you can set P bar equal to 1 in the limit of 0 weight. But again, we have to take into account the fact that the Lyman alpha line has weight, and we will see that because of that, P bar is not actually 1. And when we do the calculation, we will see that P and P bar are the same. Okay, even though the expressions that we start with will look somewhat different.
Okay.
Are there other questions? I think I'll stop here for today.
Sir, I need to ask about this epsilon. When we were calculating epsilon and by using the thermal equilibrium,
Yes.
we assume that this P that we got in gamma 2s plus 3 gamma P 2P, we assume that P is 1 because almost the number of photons that is produced is very small as compared to the number of photons in the thermal bath.
Yes.
And all the photons that hit that excite 1s states are in the thermal bath.
Yes.
But now when we are using this non-equilibrium process, we are saying that the this P bar is coming from all the photons that were not earlier absorbed in 1s to 2p transition, or effectively they are not being they are not coming from 2p to 1s transition.
Yeah. So 2p to 1s, those p's have already been taken into account, right? Those have gone into p. Okay. But now we are talking about the thermal bath excitation, the excitation from thermal bath photons. Okay? And here you are talking about the depletion of the thermal bath photons by the 1s to 2p transition. That's what goes into E. I mean, you are wondering that if there is also an enhancement because there is a 2p to 2s, right? But that has already gone into this formula, this part. In this rate equation, right? There are two terms, right? We have in this rate equation, there are two terms. There are two terms. The ones that come from 2s to 2p to 1s transition and actually causes transition back from 1s to 2p, that is already accounted for in writing this p.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, because you have subtracted it out. Right? Those processes have been subtracted out in writing this p in the first place. Yeah, otherwise you have to reorganize this, or some of these terms could go here. Right? But if you look at the way we have organized it, right, the ones that are causing 1s to 2s transition from the Lyman alpha photons that are actually produced from the 2p to 1s, those are already counted in this formula over this term over here.
Okay, yeah. Is that why P and P bar are equal?
Yeah, well, P and P bar are equal. Okay, you have to do a little more calculation to actually show that P and P bar are equal. And we'll see that there are slightly different things, right? One is talking about the future, one is talking about the past. But because of the symmetry of the Bright-Wigner distribution, they will give the same integral at the end.
Okay.
So
Yes, go ahead, please.
could you like open a new page?
New page, okay. Yes.
Now, if you were to draw something like a Planck distribution at these temperatures, like the recombination era, basically,
Yeah.
like could you sort of draw it?
Well, the Planck distribution by definition is the same,
Yeah.
right? And what's going to happen is that it will be like this.
Yeah. So there is some on the x-axis, there is some frequency corresponding to 13.6 electron volt.
Yes.
And our argument is that like at 13.6 electron volts, we don't have that many photons. So we don't really have a direct electron proton and N1s equilibrium.
Yeah, so 13.6 electron volt, but divided by times 3/4, right? Lyman alpha are like this, right?
Yeah, so this one is abundantly present, and higher ones lower ones, the lower energy ones are abundantly present.
Yeah.
So that part we are assuming to be in equilibrium.
That's right, yeah.
So I mean, maybe the photon number is too large to make a difference in this graph, but like we know that photons have fallen out of equilibrium.
Yes.
So why do we see a Planck distribution today? Like if it was just free evolution of the universe, then surely we will see a Planck distribution with just a shifted peak.
Yes.
But since all this recombination is happening after photons have fallen out of equilibrium,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
especially
so there will be some
especially
effect.
these part, this
Yeah,
13.6 into 3/4 and the lower part will be distorted from this
I
graph.
completely agree. Yeah, but you don't observe this part, right? Because the number of photons is so low here that we can't really see this part, right? But I agree that if we actually observe this, right, we'll see. Okay, I mean basically we'll see two kinds of effects which will roughly compensate each other, right? That we'll see the effect of absorption as well as emission, right? To 2p to 2s, that
Yeah.
transition will produce some photons, right? And then 2s to 2p, some photons will get absorbed.
Yeah, but will this procedure keep photons in equilibrium? At least some part of this.
No, it will not. So in this
Yeah,
part, the densities are so low that it's not in equilibrium in this region, right? But when you observe CMB, right, we normally look at the CMB near the peak, right? Because this is exponentially suppressed, right? You look at the factors, it's like 10, the amplitude here is like 10 to the minus 10 times the amplitude here.
Oh.
Right? Because this is a very small part of the CMB, right? So that's not what you observe.
Like, okay.
So when you say that we see the CMB spectrum, we see the CMB spectrum near the peak.
And that part we still expect to be like falling
That
up.
part we expect to be
Planck distribution.
Planck distribution, exactly. Right, the n gamma that we see here, right, n gamma over nb is still very large, right?
Yeah, so those photons don't really, like, the number of photons that have interacted in this recombination process near the peak doesn't really matter to this.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's precisely because of this large ratio.
Okay.
Any other question? Okay, so if not, I'll just stop and we'll continue tomorrow.